Woo. Okay. There's so many people here. Loving it. Would you like to start, Clay?
Sure. So sort of kick us off, want to talk a little bit about some of the discussions we've had in the past and some of the things that have rolled out for that. So, over the last several months, we've been talking with the Council of Mortals, hearing feedback, taking that feedback, and rolling it wherever we can into our development process. So, some of those things that have gone live, way back in July, we talked about matchmaking and the team has been working on integrating Open Match into the game. They've launched that, and then just this week, we went live with a much requested feature of not requeuing into somebody that you've just played before. So we should be seeing people not rematching people that they've played previously. Uh, on the balance side of things, there's been a lot of talk about the meta. I will have some discussions a little bit later today about first turn advantage. But on the balance side of things, we have taken a lot of feedback from the Council of Mortals, particularly when uh, we were looking at how things had gone, sort of post core set refresh, and just what we were doing to try to improve the game in the middle overall. And we have been adjusting our approach to both card creation and balance based off of that feedback, and that integrates into everything like the cards from Light's Verdict to the changes to Mortal Judgment and beyond. So we'll continue to see that moving forward. Another key point that the council made is the strong belief that limiting card sets is important to the overall health and economy of the game. So Light's Verdict showed that we did limit the supply of the set, and overall, I think we're pretty happy internally with the results of Light's Verdict and where things have sort of stabilized out in the ecosystem overall. Um, Whenever we're meeting internally to discuss, the roadmap where we're going next, the feedback from the council is part of that equation on the requested features. It is a balancing act between the things that we believe we need to internally to carry us forward, not just with the existing community, but to grow it beyond. But it has played into the road mapping as we look at our next cycle of development and uh, trying to find the exact word there of I want to make sure that people understand that in the grand scheme of things, the council is still fairly young in its cycle. This is something that even the discussions that we're having today, the resulting impacts may not be felt until several months down the line. Uh, but it has been really useful for us to have a direct line through to the community and hear uh, the things that concern you all the most. Um, There are other things that are still in progress, across minting welcome set cards. We're still discussing the API internal with engineering and how we can improve that. That is definitely something that we're looking at carrying forward. And as we get these things on the roadmap and start making progress, we'll keep you in line. Shall we dive in?
Cool. Today's agenda is 5 topics, and they will be 10 minutes each, and I will make sure that no one goes over the 10 minutes or else. So, the first agenda will be increasing God's utility. JFA will be the speaker. Set rotation, which JFA will also be the speaker. Um, Number 3 is lack of achievement progress, also JFA. Number 4 is first turn advantage, caution fun, and bug bounty and how we're addressing bugs by Sam Bam. So let's get started with increasing God's utility. I did not ask the questions, and we have the questions listed out in the agenda. So if everyone wants to look at that, and there will be meeting minutes after this. So we will be addressing important questions. And since we had time last time, I will read out this question. Which option is the team considering in order to increase God's demand in the short and middle term? Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's a great question. Right now we're looking at essentially I don't want to call it like a full economic revamp, but a lot of changes we want to implement like over the next like 12 months. Of course, like Clay had mentioned, there's a lot of priorities we're chasing. So with the economic revamp, we're aiming to have a lot more utility and usefulness of gods, as well as our cards and future new types of NFTs. And we want to make sure everything's really centered around unique utility, cool utility. Um, so with gods itself, what we'll probably be end up doing based on what we're planning and building internally is rolling releases of new uses of gods. So even though we have like a big picture thing that we want to aim for and implement, we're not going to wait, and build for 8, 9, 10 months and then release everything at once. We'll probably little by little release more things, and that would include, changes to how you can forge cards, uses for gods that'll just kind of amplify game experiences, as well as kind of like smaller adjustments regarding gods themselves. um, so we have some interesting kind of experiments we want to start doing, that are smaller, but those lessons learned that we'll get from those experiments will actually help us design bigger gods changes. And like I said, for us, it's a full economy that we're looking to really level up. So it's not just gods utility, but also the card economy and any future NFT as well economy.
Yeah, to add on really quick here too, because this is something that I know keeps my brain occupied late into the evening. There's an important distinction too between things that cycle gods through the ecosystem and things that sink gods out of the ecosystem. And one of the things that I would love further Console of Mortals ideas on is where we can sink things out of the ecosystem. The solution here is that we sink gods out by throwing them through into packs, but that's really just cycling them through the ecosystem as a whole. Like selling packs is how we fund operations. So, those gods do go back into the ecosystem to help us pay our bills. And there are other things that you can consume gods more completely and sort of hold them off on the side, potentially to be used more in the future. But like where we can find those sinks in the system, I think that's going to have more of an impact overall. Or the other part of it are systems that lock gods up. So, like one of the crazy ideas that came out is like you've got a baby dragon. It's a trinket, and it sits on its hoard, and you're basically locking up gods, in that baby dragon's hoard, and that's helped growing and evolve that trinket over time. As an example, not saying that we're necessarily going to do that, but that's a place where even though those gods are still in the overall ecosystem, they're sort of locked away. This is also where things like staking come into the mix. But any ideas that help to uh, sync gods out or sort of lock gods up, I think are ideas I would be excited to hear and explore.
Yeah, one way I kind of like been positioning it internally when we start talking about God's usage is like, all right, in this situation, is God's like iron ore that we want to use to refine into something else? Is it gold that we want people to kind of hold and hoard? Or in this case, is it like coins that we want people to use to transact in? And so that's kind of like every time we set up, hey, let's talk about new ways to use gods. We said, okay, are we positioning it like this, or that? And then we start working on that. So obviously doing all three is hard because one can kind of cancel out the other. You can imagine like, oh yeah, we want gods to really, really appreciate and value. It's like, oh yeah, but the utility will get very expensive. But that's kind of how we think about it internally when we start discussing new ways to use gods.
I think the last thing I'd note there is some of the way that I know I've been looking at it uh, is not necessarily in the direct action that we're going to be taking, but what are the core systems that we need in order to run experiments in this space? So, in working with some other people on the product management side of the team, it's how can we get features onto the roadmap that let us play in this space versus just having one direct solution outcome. And that's me.
Just one other piece that I wanted to kind of add on top of what Daniel and Glenn have been talking about, which is I think some of the more medium term outlook is in the short term. And I think this kind of carries over to one of the other solution ideas that the council has been talking about, which is improving like the mechanics of our staking. And I think in the short term, really giving more value to this to the staking program, and goes back to what Clay was talking about, is definitely something that I'm very interested in and excited about. And there were some ideas because I think we know that our staking program targets a particular audience really well, but it does fail to address the target audience that don't have a lot of odds. Seeing a lot of value out of that. So improving and introducing some interesting mechanics that can kind of target that's I think something in the short term that we can try and do. So really keen to hear more ideas around that one.
I am now bringing the microphone over to JFA. Do you have anything that you would like to add on to this?
Yes, very briefly. Hi all, it's good to be here. It's good to hear that the insights that the council provides on behalf of the player base are useful. That's great. Thank you all for your insights regarding the idea of increasing God's value. I think that the idea of finding more ways to sync or lock goals is very important. In fact, another topic to be discussed, probably not today, is an idea that has also been suggested in this discussion about increasing utility of gods, which is increasing the attractive of staking through tiered rewards. And this is in some way related to the idea of evolution of the trinket that Chris has just shared. In fact, evolutions can be another way to sync gods. And we always like to share some specific suggestions, and we'd love to hear what do you think about these ideas for incentivizing the use of gods in order to boost sale of packs. This is applying a small discount or adding cosmetics in some way within the packs that are purchased using gods, raffles or high quality cards, etc.
Yeah, and I think we've got that, the suggestion on staking, not in the agenda today, but in the Discord channel, and happy to do some more twiddling on that there with you before the next council.
I'm going to ask if there is anything else, because I know that the staking is a current topic going on, so we can formulate further on that one, so we can have a great agenda. As I believe we may be done with this topic, and if needed, we will continue async.
Eclipse, sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure I've heard anything concrete regarding these ideas of applying a small discount when gods are used in order to buy packs, these kind of things. I'm not waiting for an immediate answer about this, but I just would like to know what the team thinks of these options.
So that one, for example, of providing a small discount and some other ones, we're actually actively discussing a number of these internally as essentially tests that we want to start seeing. Hey, how do players react to this? What is the impact of things? So for us, also, is kind of when we look at gods and about kind of increasing the amount of gods that end up flowing back to us. For example, if we put a discount on purchasing cards or packs using gods, that's a lot more gods that flows to us. And then on our side, it's like, okay, at some point we need to start realizing these gods as revenue to pay for, our operations and things. And so we're kind of looking at like farther and farther down the funnel. But I could say, like, for example, that one is in active discussions in our list of tests that we want to do in the short term. So yeah, still discussing, still planning that roadmap, seeing which ones we prioritize and others. But like I said, there are lots of small changes in the tests we want to do in the short term before we start like dedicating lots of resources to building bigger and bigger changes to gods. But yeah, I could definitely say it's not just like paying lip service to these ideas. Like they're on documents internally and being discussed and modeled out, and kind of all the use cases being fleshed out, so we can take next steps.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of it, when it comes to using gods to buy, packs that potentially have a chance of cosmetics, I think what we're also looking at on that front, actually probably not also, but more looking at on that front with cosmetics is, um, buying those directly, with gods as another option in the mix. Um, Historically, we've used cosmetics as sort of additional add-on rewards on top, similar to with Light's Verdict with Lysander's Spear. But with trinkets and boards coming to IMX not too far on the horizon, I believe, that opens us up to the potential to using the purchasing system to access those directly as well.
I will
That's
be interrupting
that's good to
JFA.
hear. Thank you.
We have set over the 10 minutes and on to the next topic. I am glad that it was awesome to hear that. If anything, remember, just let us know and I will relay the information. So the next topic, which is also you, JFA, set rotation. The important questions are, when is the first set rotation going to take place? And what measures are being considered in order to ensure that rotated sets keep their value? I shall bring this over to Clay.
Yeah, so this has been one that we've been talking with, internally with the team on, what makes sense for set rotation for Gods Unchained. So for those in the audience who have not been through this before, essentially all major modern TCGs go through set rotation where basically the front list competitive play happens with the most recent sets. This is used to sort of drive demand for those sets. It is used to simplify the overall design space. It's used to, essentially carry the product forward. And that means that when rotation happens, the older cards are usually sent to a legacy format, be it, wild or historic, whatever it is. And typically what we see across these games is most players play standard, the front list set, and these legacy formats are usually forgotten. They have less sort of tournament support, if they have any. They definitely have less design focus on the balance of things and whatnot. And what I can say is, in looking at the math of card sets for Gods Unchained, we are different from a lot in that we have the Genesis set and the core set as a foundation to our overall meta. Genesis is here to stay, core is here to stay, and then we have our seasonal sets and mini sets like Light's Verdict sort of in the mix, as well as some promo cards. And talking through this, like when we look at if we brought a traditional sort of like standard rotation to GU, it doesn't really have the same impact that you would have in a lot of games because Genesis, makes up such a huge portion of the overall meta, along with core cards. The seasonal set cards are actually a much smaller piece of the overall puzzle, and that has led us down the path of potentially turning this mechanic on its head, where the primary competitive format for Gods Unchained would be unrotated. It would be this eternal format where all the cards ever printed are viable in it, And that would be where we would be directing our overall attention as we're adding new card sets into the mix of ensuring that this legacy format, stays healthy and competitive. I will say this is a much harder problem in the design space than a standard sort of rotation of things. But with all of the additional concerns in the mix across Web3 games, with ensuring that these cards have retained utility, ensuring that they maintain their value moving forward, it's also something that makes a lot of sense. So it isn't necessarily the standard thinking, but it's something that we're exploring seriously as a solution. At the same time, we are looking at what it would look like if we did a rotation of the seasonal cards out with Core and Genesis remaining. But at the moment, that isn't as appealing to us as a solution to the mix. It's definitely something that we welcome additional insight from the community on once you have some time to process and sort of think it through. But the more I've sat with it after we had this thinking, the more it does make sense to me. This does open up the question of, with such a complex design space, how would we handle problem cards in the mix? How would we give utility to cards that have lesser utility? Because in a card pool that size, you're going to have cards that simply aren't as weighty as others. So this is using tools like we've already been experimenting a bit with, like with the Cosmic Shift. It would potentially open up the can of worms with things like banning. And I think if we were ever to go down that path, it is something that we would explore very carefully with the community before we did so. But we don't have a solution today. And I do expect this is going to take some iterative feedback as we continue to refine exactly what this is going to look like and sort of take it to all of you through the council and the community as a whole to reach a final resolution. It's not going to happen this year, so we've got some time here. But yeah, that's it at a high level.
Yeah, and just as a quick note on this, I want to emphasize to the council that we have not locked this direction yet. I think that there's like pretty broad consensus that this is kind of where we want to go, but because we haven't finished mapping it all out yet and thinking through the further consequences of it, we are not fully committed to it. But on a personal note, I find this one and this direction particularly interesting. And I think that this is our opportunity to kind of really kind of distinct, if we can make it work and create a system that, is balanced, which is much harder to do than one would think, right? Because you have to really kind of think through the future in a really different way. And you remove your ability to balance, through changing the meta in set intervals. But if we're able to kind of make it work, I think that this actually is the thing that creates a really kind of interesting system, and B, also kind of rewards a lot of the people that have been playing with us since the beginning. So.
Happy for any comments from JFA?
So thank you. It is great to hear that you are really working hard on this, and that this year we are not expecting any news regarding future set rotations. In the last Ask Me Anything session with Daniel and Justin, they said that your main objectives at the moment are keeping the meta fresh regarding set rotations, preserving the value of cards, and making sure that players have enough time to know when something is going to change. And so in this sense, I think that we have to share a message of calm, and we do believe that cards value can be preserved. In fact, there are a bunch of really cool ideas, and we invite you all to share your ideas in order to make a set rotation when it comes an opportunity. And naturally, we will be also very interested in hearing the ideas that the team is considering in order to preserve the value of the cards. I think I have nothing else to add regarding this topic.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I would say from my side is I know for me, getting to a point where we're looking at a standard set rotation is something that had me concerned because it does it creates a very tricky environment where uh, when you split the player base like that, one side is going to essentially win as where the majority of players are going to be, and um, I haven't looked through like the second and third knock-on effects of going to uh, this sort of eternal format approach, but I can say that the team can tell you, like, I'm an emotional leader, and very often in the past when things have felt right, it's a really good indicator. But this is where we then need to take it out of that emotional state. You look at things much more analytically to ensure that this is going to work in the long run, and we're working on that. And happy to continue to work with you guys as well. But yeah, you want to take us to the next question?
How'd you know? So the next agenda is also JFA. You're here so much. Lack of achievement progress. And the question is, which functionalities does the team plan to implement in the short, medium, and long term in order to make sure that players feel a sense of progress? I shall pass the mic over to Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a big one for us actually. It's kind of combines two areas. It's the achievements and the progression, right? And what I think here is we are looking at establishing kind of a baseline, right? Making sure players, no matter where they are in their journey, they're hitting achievements and they're seeing, visual representations of those achievements. And then the new layer that we started designing interesting solutions to is how do players take these out of the of purely having them represented in the game. And I think that's where Web3 becomes an interesting play. So we've been looking at more of the newer technology regarding Web3 and how players who have actually earned achievements can get the visual representation. Think of like trophies or badges, things like that. Of oh, you won imagine under 4 turns or something like that, or you've won 500 games. So taking these achievements and then translating them into kind of like items within Web3 that they can share within their Web3 space. We know a lot of social media platforms are moving towards the Web3, and we want to make sure that players are actually being able to essentially show off what they've done in the game outside of just the game. So I think that's where I'm more excited to kind of work on the achievement piece. But of course, we need that foundational layer of what are the achievements? What do players need to do to get those? And we do have some interesting ideas already, as well as kind of designs that we want to start digging deeper into. And it's mixing it together with some really cool progression routes to make sure that players don't feel like they've maxed out achievements. There's always something else to go for as you get better and better and spend more time within the game. And yeah, but that's kind of like the approach we're taking right now. I don't know, Clay, if there's any actual specific ones we touch on that we're currently working on.
Yeah, I don't think I have a specific example to share here. I mean, the first part of this really is getting trinkets and boards moved onto the blockchain itself. So those are more descriptions of just like they let the player show off a little bit of just their own personality into the mix. But we do have this overall pillar for Gods Unchained in players' ability to showcase what they've done. And this is something that I think we'll see progress on in the coming year to not just guide players along in their journey when they're joining the game, but for long-term players as well. This general concept of being to showcase your achievements, and this isn't just in like the competitive space. So yes, you can show off that you've had 500 wins, that you're level 1,000, that you potentially won a tournament. But I think the other part of this is in Web3, there is far more to sort of showcase in your achievements beyond just the competitive side of things. And the competitive is a big part of it, but there's also competition, in the marketplace. It's like, are you somebody who has a complete set of cards? Like, do you have a set completed? Like, there are multiple stages there on the marketplace. Like I've had, over 1,000 trades, like whatever those elements are. I think it's important to see it not just as an integration of the competitive side of the game, but just of the overall ecosystem when it comes to that sort of showcasing of achievement.
Yeah, but I guess also just to add two quick things. So one, the answer to how we think about implementing this eternal format will have an influence on how we think about achievement and progression. And then the other kind of semi-concrete thing that I can say, which I'm actually pretty excited about, is that we have other games that we are working on within the Immutable Game Studio. So, Guild of Guardians is the one that's next up on the docket that folks are aware of, and there's been a lot of traction around that. And then we're working on a couple of other things. And one thing that we're thinking about is that the identity that you have playing in our games probably should persist, And so one of the things that we're actively kind of thinking about is how those get linked and how those achievements can not just be seen in one game, but seen in multiple games, and what those achievements can then unlock, whether that's things like early access to things, or whether it kind of opens up the ability to purchase like new things or first, or that those are some of the things that we're exploring. And I'm being really hesitant because I know that if I share too much, V, who is our head of marketing, who sits behind all of this and listens to all of us, will literally stab me with a fork. But I think that the two takeaways are that one part of this is informed by how we think about the evolution of set rotations. And the other part of it has to do with what does it look like in the context of multiple games of the Immutable Game Studio.
Yeah, I just want to echo something Justin just mentioned is in this world that we're currently working in, achievements can be and many times should be more than just a trophy. They should actually kind of give you additional benefits, right? Be it in a different game, be it in GU itself. So that's kind of the approach we take when we start designing a lot of these things that players can ultimately be rewarded with is, okay, that's an awesome trophy. Should we add anything else? What does it do? And if like, yes, there is many things we can do. It's like, okay, cool. Let's explore this some more. So it's kind of like taking your typical Steam achievements and leveling up like multiple levels.
I bring the mic over to JFA.
Thank you. Let me say that the idea of having a unique identity, let's say, sharing achievements in different games sounds really cool. And it is good to know that you are working also very hard in this. Yeah, as you know, as I have said, we always like to provide some specific proposals that can be implemented more or less fast. For example, avoid displaying collector titles until they are working again. I think that it makes no sense that a player with 1,000, 2,000 games has Novice as collector title. Also, changing the user pick. Rats are lovely, but some changes about this will be also probably welcomed by the player base. And
Yeah, it occurs to me, JFA, also that there are these obvious things that we should fix. And I want to assure you that they are just being sequenced on the roadmap. But I also agree with you. Being a rat sometimes annoys me.
all right. So nothing else to add. I think that we've heard from you that you are trying to develop all this. So thank you. I'm sorry for spending so much time this time with these topics that I have been the speaker.
No, don't ever apologize for bringing up good agendas, you know? This is what we need. So we're going to move onwards. And reminder, if we need to continue this async, we will. So I shall bring you to leave the stage. And the next agenda is first turn advantage. The important questions are, is the team still considering potential solutions to lessen first turn advantage? Are there any favorite solutions the team would like to share? And can we expect to see any potential solutions tested on the PTR? The speaker for this one is Caution, and I know you're in here. I saw you. Cool. And hello. And I
Hey.
shall bring the mic over to Clay.
So yeah, on the list of things that keeps Clay up at night, this is definitely on the list. Yes, we are actively still considering, what we're going to be doing with first turn advantage. When it comes to favorite forms of attack, the two areas that we discuss the most would be, in pips, and do we need to make changes to the pip system to adjust for first turn advantage? What changes could we make there? That one I think is probably more of a non-starter, though. Most of the things we've explored just haven't internally brought us to a place where we think it's going to lead to a meaningful change without some pretty major impacts outside of that. And then the other one is in favor. We believe that favor plays a pretty big part in the first turn advantage, and some of it comes to what changes are going to work to reduce some of that snowballing of control and card advantage. I can say, working very closely with the design team at the moment, that we are hard at work on some content at the moment, and some deeper problems in the game itself. We've been spending a fair amount of time on crafting, concrete rules for how the game ideally operates. So, a lot of card games. I know Hearthstone is another one. The answer to what are the rules for the game is how does it play in game, and to large effect, Gods Unchained has been developed down that path where it's how it works in game is essentially the rules of the project. And what this initiative that we've been working on is trying to do is bring that into explicit clarity on our end from design on how we expect it to operate, in some ways to better identify bugs in the mix too, but also to provide clarity for players. So that's a bit of a tangent. But as we nail down those, it is our intention to free up more space for Bryn in particular to get some prototypes together for us to play. And then once we have those in place, yeah, definitely we'll roll them out to the PTR. As in so many cases, I do not have an exact date for you on this. In many cases in Council of Mortals, we will not have dates, but we can talk about the initiatives that we're under. And I would say this is high on the list.
Okay, I understand that, priorities and all. In the meantime, is there any chance that, I'm assuming that the team has more internal data to work with than the community has in public data. Is there any chance that that exists for first turn advantage in particular, and B, that you would consider sharing some of that data, some of those more nuanced metrics to the community?
Yeah. I think some of it is do you have any key questions about the data?
Yeah, I mean, mostly referring to just, first turn data in general, maybe making it part of the same match data that's included in the public API, just so, as a player base, we can dissect, the influence of first turn advantage in various matchups, and deck builders like myself can use it as a tool to, maybe build better rounded decks or, I think I just think it'd be
provide better
interesting
advice on how to play when I don't know about what it would take to integrate it into the API. The API is a whole nother can of worms that we're continuing to dig into on our end. Let me chat with the team, and if nothing else, we can potentially get some high-level data that we use on that front to sort of look at things.
Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome. More information, the better.
Yep. Yeah, and in general, I don't think there's any grand need for this to be secret.
I agree wholeheartedly. Glad to hear it.
I'd only also add that, like, in the next few months, we're actually looking to put in some really good, like, player telemetry and balance, essentially tools that allow us to better track the balance across lots of different scenarios that are happening within the game. And that'll just better inform us, like, how we move about balancing, like, first term advantage. Because it's very easy to kind of swing all the way the other way, right? And so it is kind of an iterative step, and we'll have the tools put in place in the coming months to be able to do that.
Yeah, the
Awesome.
only other last thing to note, this is also something that we've been looking at when it comes to the design of cards as well. In some of where we've been looking to flesh out the overall metagame space is in sort of like mid-range. And while I think systemically, things like favor have a part to play in this, the design of cards does as well. And some of that just comes into cards that help reverse momentum beyond just sort of like board wiping style effects. And if you've got more options for a player to have these inflections in momentum with cards, good design there can also have an impact on the space. I don't think it's this alone. I think it's going to be a confluence of different tweaks, but I think that's also a part of the overall equation.
Yeah, I remember Bryn mentioning that more reactive card design is one of the angles you guys could attack the issue with. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you guys acknowledging all the different
it is a
nuances.
many-pronged offensive on this one.
Cool. If we can help in any way, let us know.
Yeah, and I think the last part of it too is I don't have an objective from my side that whether you're going first or second, that it's always 50-50. But I think some of it is we do have matchups where first turn advantage goes outside the scope of what I would call healthy, where we're seeing like anytime you've got the person going first, winning like 70% of the time, that's clearly a problem. So it is getting it into a range. Like some decks will always have more of an advantage going first. Some ideally too have an advantage going second. And I think that's when we're going to know it's in a much healthier state, when there are certain decks that want to go second. We are not there today.
Gotcha. Well, small steps. And thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Well, is this the end of first turn advantage? If so, I will move onward.
That is the end of the first turn advantage for today. Be careful how you word that.
True. First turn advantage topic in Council Mortals. Correction. Okie doke for today.
I mean, the last thing there is this is one too where if there are unique ideas coming out of the community, definitely throw them over the fence. it's a challenging space, and any assistance is definitely welcome.
Agreed on that front. Well, onwards to bug bounties. That is the topic, and these are the questions. Well, there's only one question. So this is the question. What steps are the team currently taking to deal with bugs? And I shall pass the baton over to the mule.
The mule, hello, Sam here. Hey everyone, how are you going? Sambam, first of all, sorry, I never got back to you about the bug bounty program specifically. So I saw some discussions in Discord, com channels. I think it was Agent K suggested that we need to get better at closing the loop on some of these agenda items. So sometimes we talk quite broadly. We'll go off and do a whole bunch of work, and then realize 3 months have passed before we know it, and we need to come back and make sure we're giving you updates on these top issues regularly, I think. So in terms of the bug bounty program, we did decide against that, mainly because last time we spoke, I think it was about maybe 5 months ago, I started in my role pretty much exactly 6 months ago now. So I've had a chance to really sink my teeth into this issue and try to understand the roadblocks and the bottlenecks and what's going wrong. And it's not so much about bugs getting reported or found or reproduced. We definitely do get a lot of help from the community on those fronts, and appreciate that greatly. It's always a huge help. But the main problem comes down to how we manage them internally at the end of the day, and that's going to have the biggest wins in that space. So there's a lot to unpack here. It's a very complicated subject, but I'll try to give a bit of a summary. Just to give everyone a general update on bugs and how we're doing with them as well across the board. So, there was obviously some big problems 6 months ago with the bugs, and I generally take an approach of the triple Ps here, which is people, process, and platform, to try to figure out what's wrong and what we can improve. On the people front, we've had significant changes in the people and the team members since we last spoke. So that's needed a bit of a reset, figure out new ways of working, but it's also been a good opportunity to start fresh as well, because the existing process was broken. It wasn't working. It was sort of up to individual developers, in their time that they had available in a sprint to get to them, and there was no accountability. And then the platform just wasn't being used properly as well. So, bugs did fall down the priority list. So it's been a huge focus internally, and we've made some significant headway on a lot of those fronts. But all three of those things that I mentioned, there's multiple layers of each of those as well, right? Because when we talk about bugs, the unfortunate part is that everything sort of falls under that broad umbrella of bugs. So it might be, the buggy launcher that's playing up, clearing cache too many times. It might be claiming God's rewards from the dashboard. It might be an issue with the API and the marketplaces. Could be an issue with the game itself, or the card interactions. It goes far and wide, and all of those touch different teams, and it's hard to talk about bugs when it's so broad in that respect. And there's been a really big focus on QA more recently, and embedding
our QA teams even further into our process. So there's been a lot of releases recently that have gone out without too much of a hitch, because we have to think about daily play and earn and dashboard and a bunch of other new features that have gone out with a pretty high quality standard there. But getting to the crux of it, I would say that the majority of bugs that we're talking about are the in-game bugs with card interactions or the client itself bugging out or soft locking. So on that front, that's where the biggest focus has been, because that's probably the biggest pain points and what the majority of you would be seeing on a daily basis. So we do have a daily bug triage meeting set up now. So all new bugs reported by the community and our QA team get reviewed the following morning and triaged. We have new weekly bug meetings directly between myself and some of the key devs to review the most problematic bugs, and we've set up a bit of a strike force on this now. So our game dev manager, Hendrik, he is very motivated on this as well, and wants to really improve some of these pain points for the community, because he sees that they've been dragging on for way too long as well on his side. So we've got a bigger focus on test automations as well, which is really going to be the key piece here, I think. There's been a lot of manual QA testing, and we are getting the ball rolling with setting up much more advanced test automation pieces. So we're using a system called Game Driver, automatically runs a whole bunch of tests and test suites. And, we want to be doing those just automatically every 24 hours, effectively, where we can. But, having said all of that, I think, Sambam, you're probably thinking of some of those long bugs that have been hanging around for far too long. And I look at our priority list in the Trello board, and, I admit we haven't had as many move here as we would have liked, but we do have a priority column now, and that's what we're really focusing on with a bit of a strike force at the moment. But the flip side to that is that some of these old bugs are old bugs for a reason, and they end up getting blocked because we reach this point where it's not an easy fix, and it might need a complete redesign of the system or how a system interacts with another one. And then another bug, I think it was the pick one or delving recently, I can't quite remember, but our dev we had a dev spending a couple of days on that solid, and we still couldn't identify it. And then that reaches the point where, we need to make some tough decisions sometimes. Do we continue to have that dev resource, which is very finite, spend more time investigating that, or is the time better spent on, refactoring that code, cleaning it up properly, and redesigning the entire solution from the get-go? So there's lots of complexities, lots of layers to bugs. I think ultimately a lot of this will come down to better communication, and the platform side is probably going to be key there, where we need to improve the platform and the transparency with the bugs. We've been trialing the new Discord bug threads, and I've been working really closely with Rath on that. But I think we could still make some further improvements. And if I didn't mention it already, we're doing a complete overhaul of our existing bug management process as well. So lots of work happening internally, new processes, all the people are on board, better platforms, better communication, But having said all of that, I do acknowledge that externally, from your point of view, you probably haven't seen the needle shift too much yet still. So it was a bit of a long answer. But yeah, Sambam, keen to hear your thoughts. What else is there to add?
No, that sounds great. I wasn't really married to the bug bounty program. Just I guess there are bugs that have been around since I started playing over 2 years ago, which you mentioned. But with each new expansion, there are new bugs. And even with the most recent, which is great, Light's Verdict. I'm enjoying it, but going forward, it's concerning that there are just more. But I guess if there's a new process and you guys are sorting it out, that's great. I guess we just haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it yet, and I think as you pick up on, some things seem like they're really slow going here at GU, and this is one that has a lot of moving parts because it covers front end teams, back end teams, game dev, QA, tech art, all sorts, and some of these do need to get shifted around the teams to look into further. And you raise a good point, newer bugs, and we did see some with the latest release, and more than what we wanted for sure. We'll call that out. And there was a couple of sort of competing priorities and issues, I guess, that we had to deal with right towards the end. And some of these card interactions are quite complex as well. So I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, there's just certain amount of cards and pretty easy
If I can
to sort
chime in?
of test those. Yeah, go for it.
So there will always be bugs of some sort or another, and I totally empathize on the longest running bugs in the mix. As another change into how this is all going to be different moving forward, we've been playing internally with the combat log up and running, and I do think this is going to really change the community's ability to call out bugs accurately too. Because it'll go from a world where potentially you're taking a video clip of something and trying to describe, what's happening in the interaction, to with the combat log there, like it prints out, not quite everything at the moment, but a whole lot more of the game very transparently in the interactions taking place. And one of the hardest parts about fixing bugs is just seeing the sequencing overall and like how one particular interaction cascades into these other interactions where things break. And I know just in my experience so far playing with the combat log that it's made some of those interactions much more transparent. Also call back to the earlier sort of like games rule discussion. But that's going to be an interesting thing for me to watch as that goes live in the not too distant future, just how it sort of changes this overall discussion too, because getting that time to sort of exact clarity on what is actually breaking is the most difficult part of solving bugs. Once you actually know where the source of it lies, the resolutions are usually pretty quick. And I think this is really going to help.
And on that note, I would like to say that the 10 minutes is up, if that's okay. We could continue this async, if you guys would like. I love the insights.
Sounds good.
All good.
Thanks, Clips. Thanks,
Thank
Sambam.
you all.
Thank you.
So, now this is the end of the Council of Mortals. I really appreciate everyone for coming. However, before you go, and I know everyone's about to go, tune in tomorrow at 4 p.m. PDT on Twitch to see both me, well, Clay and I, dressed up.
Or don't. You could not. That's
or
fine.
don't, or maybe not.
Please, nobody record it or do any clips.
I'm clearing my calendar right now. Can't miss that.
It's in 23 hours. Come and join. Anyway, other than that, see y'all next time.
Yeah, we'll see you there.
Via
Thanks,
async.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Yep. Bye bye.
There's a distance between us. It's getting hard.